Welcome to the deep dive, everybody. And this time we are going to take on The Corporate Jungle by Amr Farag as our map and compass.
Oh, I like that.
For this deep dive. And I have to say, this book is seriously packed with, real world tactics and actually some kind of sobering statistics.
Yeah, he doesn't really sugarcoat it.
Yeah. I mean, I think of it as a survival guide. Not just navigating, the modern business world, but actually conquering it.
Yeah.
So I don't know, are you ready to conquer?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, good. So Farag really argues that to thrive, you kind of have to think of business like an actual jungle, right?
Yeah.
You've got to adapt and evolve and really outmaneuver the competition or what?
Or you get swallowed up.
Yeah, no pressure then, right? But seriously, though, where do we even begin with all this? I mean, 70% of corporate transformations fail. That's scary.
It is a scary statistic.
And then the idea that half of today's Fortune 500 companies could be gone in 20 years. I mean, that's a whole different level of jungle warfare, I think.
It is, and that's where Farab's idea of the corporate predators comes in.
Okay.
He outlines 15 of these hidden threats that can sabotage any company from within.
Right.
Think of them as the wolves, the pythons, the silent but deadly creatures that can just drain your profits and your productivity without you even realizing it.
So they're insidious, they're tricky.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's name some of these beasts. Give me an example of a predator that really jumped out at you from the book.
Okay, well, the dead horse theory is a classic one. This is where companies cling to failing projects.
Yeah.
Way past their expiration date. They just keep pouring resources into something that's clearly not working, refusing to cut their losses, maybe because of sunk costs or their ego or just plain denial.
It's they can see the horse is dead, but they're still trying to make it gallop somehow. So, how do you spot a dead horse situation before it drags you down?
Yeah.
What are the signs?
Well, Farag argues that you have to look beyond the surface, beyond the reports and presentations, and really focus on real outcomes. Is this project actually delivering value?
Yeah.
Are we hitting our milestones?
Right.
Or are we constantly making excuses and shifting goalposts?
Right.
That's a huge red flag to look out for.
So it's really about being honest with yourself, right? And being willing to make those tough decisions, even when it's painful.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to walk away from that dead horse.
Exactly. Yeah. And sometimes that means confronting another predator, which is the elephant in the room.
Oh, okay.
So these are the big, obvious problems that everyone sees.
Right.
Except, of course, leadership.
Right. Of course.
Right. It's like that awkward silence at Thanksgiving dinner,
Yeah, totally.
Everyone knows there's an issue, but no one wants to address it.
Right. And silence doesn't make the elephant disappear.
No.
It just lets it grow bigger and more dangerous.
Absolutely.
Right. Take the Volkswagen emissions scandal, for example.
Oh, yeah. Perfect example.
They were touting sustainability, while secretly rigging their cars to cheat on emissions tests. I mean, that elephant in the room eventually trampled their reputation and cost them billions.
Yeah. It sure did.
Yeah, that's a lesson in how ignoring a problem doesn't make it go away.
Right.
So we've got dead horses and elephants in the room. What other predators are lurking out there?
Well, the boiling frog syndrome is another sneaky one. This is where companies fail to adapt to a gradual decline.
It's okay.
So they don't notice the water slowly getting hotter until it's too late, and they're cooked.
They're cooked, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's about being aware of those subtle shifts, right? In the market, in the technology, just the competitive landscape. Don't just assume that what worked yesterday will work tomorrow.
Yeah, I think of Nokia dismissing the smartphone as a fad. They clung to their outdated models while Apple, revolutionized the whole industry. By the time they realized the water was boiling, it was way too late.
That's got to be a tough lesson to learn.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so we've identified some of these major predators in the corporate jungle.
Yeah.
But how do we actually fight back? Where do we even begin to tackle these huge kind of systemic issues?
Well, Farad argues that eliminating waste is key.
Okay.
And he dives deep into the 12 wastes of lean management. Those inefficiencies that are like termites, just eating away at your resources and slowing down your progress.
Okay, so let's talk trash. Give me an example of a waste that, people might not even realize is hurting them.
Okay, well, gluttonous vulture is a good one. This refers to overproduction in all its forms. Think about those reports that nobody reads. The excess inventory gathering dust, the endless meetings that achieve nothing.
Right.
It's all waste.
All right.
And in fact, Farag points out that a staggering 45% of corporate reports are never even read.
That's insane.
Yeah.
So much time and effort, all for nothing.
Right. It's like preparing a feast and then just throwing it all away.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And it creates this illusion of productivity, while underneath the company is actually spinning its wheels.
Yeah. So how do we stop feeding the gluttonous vulture?
Right.
How do we become more lean and efficient?
It starts with asking tough questions. Do we really need this report?
Yeah.
Is this meeting truly necessary?
Right.
Could we achieve the same outcome with fewer resources?
Right. So it's about being intentional, right?
Mm-hmm.
With our time and our energy, focusing on what truly creates value.
Right. And being ruthless about cutting out the fat. And another major form of waste is what Farag calls the sloth of delay.
Mm-hmm.
This one's all about decision bottlenecks. Think endless approvals, unanswered emails, projects stuck in limbo,
right?
All while your competitors are racing ahead.
Ugh, it's like being stuck in quicksand.
Yeah.
The harder you struggle,
exactly,
the deeper you sink.
Yeah. And this kind of delay, it often stems from fear, fear of making the wrong decision, fear of rocking the boat.
Yeah.
But inaction can be just as dangerous as making the wrong choice.
Absolutely. So how do we escape the sloth of delay? How do we get things moving again?
Well, Farad talks about empowering teams,
okay,
streamlining processes, and setting clear deadlines.
Okay.
And sometimes it's as simple as just picking up the phone instead of sending another email. Just take action.
Yeah, it's about taking action, being decisive, and not letting bureaucracy, strangle your progress.
Right. And that brings us to another form of waste, wounded prey.
Okay.
So these were the defects, the strategy failures, the projects that just limp along, bleeding the company dry. And, Farag highlights how 70% of corporate transformations fail because of poor execution.
Right.
It's like setting sail on a leaky boat.
Yeah.
You can bail water all day, but if you don't fix the holes, you're going to sink eventually.
You're going to sink. That's right. And that's where a lot of companies go wrong, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They focus on like the big flashy initiatives, but they neglect those fundamentals.
Exactly.
They lack that discipline and the rigor to actually follow through on their plans.
Yeah. They've got the vision, but not the execution.
Right. So it's not just about having a great strategy.
No.
It's about having that operational excellence, right, to execute that strategy flawlessly.
Right. Precisely. It's about attention to detail, quality control, and a relentless focus on getting things done right.
So we've got gluttonous vultures, we've got sloths of delay, we've got wounded prey, just a few of the wastes that can drag a company down.
Right, and these are just 3 of the 12. We'll explore more of these wastes in the next part of our deep dive.
Oh, there's more.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, listeners, buckle up, I guess.
Yeah.
There's more to come.
There's a lot more to uncover.
All right. Well, we'll be back soon.
Sounds good. Welcome back to our deep dive into the corporate jungle. We've been tracking these dangerous predators and wasteful habits that can creep into any organization.
Yeah, we've got a sense of the dangers lurking out there now, but how do we sharpen our instincts? Make better decisions in this corporate jungle, because it feels like one wrong move could be fatal.
Yeah, you're right. The stakes are pretty high. And that's where understanding decision-making traps and biases becomes really crucial. And Farag outlines 15 of these mental blind spots that can lead even the most seasoned leaders astray.
Okay, let's unpack a few of those. What's a bias that you think trips people up the most, even if they don't realize it?
Well, the anchoring bias is a sneaky one.
Okay.
This is where we get fixated on the first piece of information we receive, even if it's irrelevant or misleading.
Yeah.
That initial data point becomes our anchor, and it's hard to break free from its pull.
It's like that saying, first impressions matter.
Right.
But sometimes that first impression can lead you down the wrong path, especially in business.
Absolutely. And, Farag gives the example of a company setting their budget based solely on like last year's figures, without considering the current market conditions or their new strategic goals.
Right.
So they're anchored to the past,
right.
and it limits their thinking.
So how do you avoid falling into that anchoring trap? How do you even know if you're letting that first piece of information like unduly influence your decisions?
Well, it's about actively seeking out diverse perspectives, and challenging your initial assumptions.
Okay.
Don't just rely on the first report you read or the first opinion you hear. Dig deeper.
Yeah.
Gather more data. And be willing to adjust your course based on new information.
Okay, so challenge those anchors.
Yeah.
Got it. What's another bias that we should be watching out for?
Well, the optimism bias can be really dangerous, especially for like entrepreneurs and innovators, right?
Yeah.
This is where we overestimate the likelihood of positive outcomes, and we downplay those potential risks. We tell ourselves it'll all work out, even when there's evidence to the contrary.
I think we've all been guilty of that at some point.
Oh, absolutely. Of course, a healthy dose of optimism is important, but when it blinds you to reality, that's when it becomes a problem,
Right.
Farag uses, the implosion of WeWork's IPO as a cautionary tale. Right?
Yeah.
Their leadership was so focused on their ambitious vision that they ignored those financial red flags.
So their optimism, in a way, became their downfall.
Yeah.
They weren't seeing the situation clearly because they were so attached to their own, rosy projections.
Exactly. They were blinded by their beliefs in their own story, and they paid a steep price for it.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that hope is not a strategy.
Yeah.
And even the most brilliant ideas need to be grounded in reality.
So balance optimism with a healthy dose of realism.
Yeah.
Got it. What about those times when we're like stuck in a bad situation, but we can't seem to let go?
That's the classic sunk cost fallacy. We cling to a decision just because we've already invested so heavily in it, even when it's clearly not working.
Right. We've all been there. You're pouring time and money into a project, and you just can't admit defeat.
Yeah.
Even though, deep down it's a lost cause.
Right. It's like those gamblers who keep doubling down on a losing bet, hoping to recoup their losses. But in business, just like in gambling, throwing good money after bad rarely pays off.
So how do you break free from the sunk cost fallacy? How do you know when it's time to, cut your losses and move on?
Well, it's tough.
Yeah.
But you have to try to separate your emotions from the decision, Focus on the future, not the past.
Right.
Ask yourself, if I were starting from scratch today, knowing what I know now, would I invest in this project?
Right.
If the answer is no, then it's time to walk away, no matter how much you've already, sunk into it.
So it's about being honest with yourself and having the courage to admit when you're wrong.
Yeah.
Easier said than done.
Oh, absolutely.
But definitely crucial for, navigating this jungle.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, what other mental traps do we need to be aware of?
Well, the action bias can be surprisingly problematic. This is that feeling of pressure to do something, anything, even when inaction might be the better course.
I can see that happening a lot in, those fast-paced environments, where people feel like they need to be constantly moving and doing to prove their worth. You know what I mean?
Exactly. It's that always be closing mentality that can lead to those hasty decisions and wasted resources.
Yeah.
And, Farag really emphasizes the importance of taking a step back, analyzing the situation, and making, strategic decisions, not just reactive ones.
So sometimes the best action is no action, or at least not, immediate action.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's about, pausing, reflecting, and then choosing your moves wisely.
Exactly. And on the flip side of that action bias, we have analysis paralysis.
Oh, okay.
Where we get so caught up in overthinking and overanalyzing that we never actually make a decision.
It's that fear of making the wrong choice. Mm-hmm. So you just end up making no choice at all, right?
Yeah, exactly. You get stuck in this loop of research and meetings and reports.
Right.
But you never actually pull the trigger.
Right.
Meanwhile, your competitors are moving forward.
You're moving ahead.
Seizing opportunities and leaving you in the dust.
Yeah. So it's about finding that sweet spot, I guess, right?
Mm-hmm.
Between analysis and action. Yeah. You need enough information to make an informed decision.
Yeah.
But not so much that you become paralyzed.
Exactly. Data and analysis are important, but they shouldn't be used as like a crutch that prevents you from taking action.
Right.
Sometimes you just have to trust your gut,
Yeah.
make a decision, and adjust course as needed.
Right. Okay. So avoid the action bias and the analysis paralysis. What else do we need to watch out for?
Well, the availability bias can really skew our perception of reality. This is where we give more weight to information that's easily recalled.
Okay.
Or readily available, even if it's not representative of the bigger picture.
It's like judging a book by its cover, right?
Yeah.
Or like forming an opinion based on like one anecdote.
Right.
We're letting the most easily accessible information like shape our view.
Yeah.
Even if it's like incomplete or biased.
Exactly. Farag gives the example of a company making sweeping changes based on like one viral customer complaint without considering the thousands of satisfied customers who had no issues.
Right.
Right. They let that one loud voice drown out the signal from the majority.
So it's about taking a step back and looking at the data objectively. Right.
Yeah.
Don't let those emotionally charged anecdotes like hijack your decision making.
Yeah. And this bias can also affect how we perceive risk. If we've recently experienced a certain type of crisis, we're more likely to overestimate the likelihood of it happening again. It's like that saying, once bitten, twice shy.
Right.
But in business, this can make us overly cautious and risk averse.
So we might miss out on opportunities because we're so focused on avoiding a threat that may not even materialize, right?
Yeah.
We're letting the past dictate our future.
Exactly. Yeah. And that brings us to another interesting bias, which is the loss aversion bias. We tend to feel the pain of a loss more strongly than the pleasure of an equivalent gain.
Right.
And this can make us incredibly resistant to change, even when change is necessary for growth.
It's like that saying, better the devil you know than the devil you don't.
Yeah.
You'd rather, stick with the familiar, even if it's not ideal, than risk venturing into the unknown.
Yeah, and this can be a major obstacle to innovation and progress,
Yeah.
Companies become so focused on avoiding potential losses
that they miss out on potential gains.
So how do we overcome this fear of loss, right? How do we become more comfortable with taking risks and embracing change?
Well, it's about reframing our thinking. Instead of focusing on what we might lose, focus on what we might gain.
Okay.
What are the potential rewards of making this change?
Right.
What are the costs of staying the same? Often the potential gains far outweigh the potential losses.
So shift the perspective from fear to opportunity.
Exactly.
Don't let the fear of loss paralyze you.
Right.
Take that calculated risk and see what happens.
Exactly, yeah. And that brings us to another interesting bias, the halo effect. This is where our overall impression of someone or something influences our judgment of their specific attributes, right?
Okay.
So for example, if we admire a particular CEO, we might be more likely to overlook flaws in their company's strategy or performance. It's like, when you have a crush on someone and you just ignore all their red flags because you're blinded by their charm.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. You're letting your emotions cloud your judgment.
Right. And the opposite can also happen. We call it the horn effect, where there's a negative first impression can color our perception of everything else.
So it's about being aware of these biases and trying to evaluate decisions and ideas on their own merits.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Separate from our personal feelings, cut the people involved.
Exactly. Strip away the emotional baggage. Look at the facts objectively.
Right.
And this is especially important when it comes to evaluating our own past decisions. We often fall prey to the hindsight bias.
Yeah.
We look back and think, oh, I knew that was going to happen, even though we had no real way of knowing.
Right. It's that I told you so mentality.
Yeah.
Where we rewrite history to make ourselves look smarter. But it can prevent us from actually learning from our mistakes. Right?
Automatically. We need to be honest with ourselves about, what we knew and when we knew it. Otherwise, we're doomed to repeat the same mistakes.
So acknowledge the role of luck. Be honest about what you could have done differently. And use those lessons to inform your future decisions.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. And another bias that can trip us up is the IKEA effect.
Oh, yeah. I like this one.
Right. We tend to place a higher value on something simply because we built it ourselves.
Right. It's natural to feel attached to our own creations.
I totally get this one. I've definitely been guilty of like clinging to a project or an idea just because, I poured so much of myself into it.
Right. But this bias can be dangerous in business, especially in product development,
Yeah.
We can become so invested in our own ideas that we're blind to their flaws and resistant to feedback. Farag gives the example of Google Glass. It was a technically impressive product, but it ultimately failed to resonate with consumers.
Right.
They were so focused on the technology that they overlooked the user experience and market demand.
Right. It's a reminder that sometimes we need to be willing to, like, kill our darling. Yeah. No matter how much we love them.
Yeah.
If an idea isn't working, let it go. Move on.
Exactly.
All right, one last bias before we move on. What about those situations where we just kind of defer to the person in charge, even if we have doubts?
Right. That's the authority bias in action.
Okay.
We're conditioned to respect and obey those in positions of authority, which can make it difficult to challenge their decisions, even when we know they might be wrong.
So it's about creating a culture where everyone feels safe to speak up.
Yeah.
Regardless of their title or position,
right.
You need that diversity of thought and perspective to make the best decisions.
Exactly. It's about fostering, open communication, constructive dissent, and a willingness to challenge the status quo, even when it comes from the top.
Right.
Right. Don't be afraid to ask tough questions and push back when you see something that doesn't seem right.
So we've got anchoring, optimism bias, sunk cost fallacy, action bias, analysis paralysis, availability bias, loss aversion, halo effect, hindsight bias, IKEA effect, and authority bias, just to name a few of the mental traps.
A lot to keep track of.
That can lead us astray in the corporate jungle.
It is.
That's a lot to keep in mind.
It is, and it highlights how easily our own minds can sabotage our success.
Right.
The key takeaway here is that awareness is the first step.
Okay.
By understanding these biases, we can start to recognize them in ourselves and take steps to mitigate their influence.
So the next time you're about to make a big decision, pause and ask yourself, am I falling into any of these traps?
Yeah.
Challenge your assumptions. Seek out those diverse perspectives and be willing to adjust your course as needed.
Exactly.
Welcome back to the deep dive.
Yeah.
We've been kind of hacking our way through the corporate jungle, right? Oh. Uncovering those predators that lurk in the shadows.
Yeah.
And all those mental traps that can trip us up. It's a real jungle out there.
It is. And, thankfully, Farag doesn't just leave us with a list of problems, right? He actually equips us with a powerful agility arsenal to fight back.
Oh, okay. I like it. Let's gear up then. So what are some of those weapons we need to add to our arsenal if we actually want to survive and thrive in this jungle?
Well, we've touched on AI-driven KPI dashboards before,
right.
But I think let's really dive into how they can transform your decision-making.
Okay.
Think of these dashboards as like your company's central nervous system.
Okay.
They provide those real-time insights into like every vital sign of your business.
So we're talking about tracking those key performance indicators, right? Like revenue, customer satisfaction, operational efficiency, all the metrics that really matter.
Exactly. But it's not just about collecting the data.
Right.
It's about making that data actionable.
Yeah.
Farag stresses the importance of visualizing the data in a way that's easy to understand.
Right.
And actually using it to drive those decision making.
So instead of drowning in spreadsheets, you have those clear dynamic dashboards that highlight trends, spot anomalies, maybe even trigger alerts when something needs your attention.
Exactly, precisely. Imagine, being able to predict a potential supply chain disruption weeks before it actually happens, just by analyzing the patterns in your data.
That's incredible. That's the power of AI, right? You can see those patterns that we might miss, and it can help us anticipate problems before they even arise.
Exactly. It's about moving from a reactive mindset to a proactive one.
Right.
Instead of constantly putting out fires, you're anticipating those fires and taking steps to prevent them.
Okay. So this kind of leads us to another essential tool in the agility arsenal, which is kill metrics and fail fast frameworks.
Yes.
Okay, those sound a little intense. Tell me more about how those work.
These tools are all about making those tough decisions quickly.
Okay.
And cutting your losses when necessary. It's about having the courage to abandon projects that aren't working.
Right.
Even if you've already invested significant time and resources.
And that takes a lot of discipline, I think.
Yeah.
To pull the plug on something that you've put so much effort into. How do you know when it's time to let go?
Well, that's where kill metrics come in, right?
Okay.
You set those clear, measurable criteria up front.
Yep.
That, if not met, within a specific time frame, trigger an automatic termination of the project.
Oh, wow.
Takes the emotion out of the decision and forces you to be objective.
Yeah. So you're not getting attached to a project just because you've sunk a lot of time or money into it.
Right.
You're letting the data kind of guide your decision making.
Exactly. And this leads to a faster, more agile organization, right? You're constantly experimenting,
right,
learning from your mistakes, and pivoting to new opportunities without getting bogged down by failing projects.
It's like that saying, fail fast and fail often.
Right.
But the key is to learn from those failures and use them to improve your process.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's next in our agility arsenal? What else can help us kind of navigate this unpredictable jungle?
Well, real-time risk squads are essential for any organization that wants to stay ahead of the curve. These are dedicated teams that act as your company's early warning system.
So they're like the sentinels, constantly scanning the horizon for potential threats. What kind of threats are we talking about?
Everything from cybersecurity breaches and supply chain disruptions. To regulatory changes and shifts in consumer behavior, right? Anything that could potentially disrupt your business.
So these squads need to be pretty diverse in terms of their expertise. Right?
Yeah.
You need to be able to see the big picture and understand how all these different factors could impact the company.
Exactly. And they need to be able to move fast. They need to be able to identify potential threats early, assess the risks, and develop those strategies to mitigate those risks before they become major problems.
It sounds like having a strong real-time risk squad.
Yeah.
Could be the difference between weathering a storm and getting swept away by it.
Yeah.
So what else do we need to add to our arsenal?
Well, bias checklists are another incredibly valuable tool, especially for leaders.
Okay.
We've talked about all those mental traps that can distort our decision making, and these checklists help us identify and mitigate those biases.
So it's like having a safety net to catch yourself before you fall into one of those mental traps.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So how do these checklists work?
Well, they force you to slow down and question your assumptions. They prompt you to consider alternative perspectives and challenge your own thinking. For example, if you're about to make a big investment, the checklist might ask, am I being overly optimistic about the potential returns?
Right.
Am I letting the halo effect influence my judgment?
So it's about being more intentional.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
With your decision making, pausing to reflect before you act.
Yeah.
It's about challenging those ingrained patterns of thought.
Right.
And making sure you're not letting your biases kind of lead you astray. Okay, so what else is in our arsenal? We've got dashboards, we've got frameworks, we've got risk squads, we've got checklists. What's next?
Well, cross-functional war rooms are incredibly effective for tackling those complex problems and driving fast execution. These are dedicated spaces where leaders from different departments can come together to collaborate and solve problems in real time.
It sounds like it helps break down those silos that can exist between departments, right? Bringing everyone together to focus on a common goal.
Exactly. And it creates a sense of urgency and shared ownership. Everyone's in the room working together to find solutions and make decisions quickly.
It's like a command center, right? Where everyone is on high alert, ready to respond to any challenge. So we've got all these amazing tools in our agility arsenal, right?
Yeah.
Dashboards, frameworks, risk squads, checklists, and war rooms. But it seems like there's one more ingredient we need to make all this work.
Yeah, you're right. It's the agile mindset.
Got it.
You know, it's the foundation for everything else.
So it's not just about having the right tools, it's about having the right way of thinking.
Exactly. The Agile mindset is all about, you know, being flexible, adaptable, and willing to embrace change.
Yeah.
It's about challenging those assumptions, experimenting constantly, and learning from your mistakes.
It's about embracing uncertainty and seeing it as an opportunity for growth and innovation.
Yeah.
Right? It's about not being afraid to fail, but rather seeing failure as a stepping stone to success.
Exactly. And it's about creating a culture where innovation is rewarded and failure is seen as a learning opportunity.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the corporate jungle, you know, we leave you with this challenge. Are you ready to embrace agility, challenge your biases, and build a business that's truly built to last?
You know, the tools are there.
Right.
The knowledge is there. It's up to you to put it all into action.
That's it for this episode of The Deep Dive. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into the world of ideas, insights, and strategies that matter.
Until then, stay curious,